Welcome to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. Join attorneys James Moore, Kevin Littlejohn, and Mysty Blagg as they explore law, technology, and persuasive arguments. Sit back, relax, and listen to your zealous advocates.
Welcome to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. It's so good to have you join us today. I'm Mysty Blagg, attorney here at Shipman and Wright. I'm joined by my colleagues and friends, James Moore and Kevin Littlejohn.
Good to be back, Mysty.
Yeah, great to be
back. For
back.
another episode.
And we have a wonderful guest today, Amanda Hill, who, bestow my heart, is a fellow healthcare attorney. Amanda, so glad to have you today.
Thank you. What a pleasure. This is going to be a fun chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're located in Austin, Texas. Is that right?
Yes, home of hippies and tacos. Austin, Texas is correct.
That's what I heard. I heard it was real exciting out there in Austin. I got to get there.
I love it. And you have your own law firm, Hill Health Law. But I'm really interested to hear about your new venture, Guard My Practice. Could you tell us a little about that?
Sure. I mean, do you want to start a startup when you have a law firm and a billion children? That's up to you. But it was a journey. I'll tell you, I've been a lawyer for 23 years and I've been in-house, and then I started my own practice and it was doing really well. But in the middle of COVID, all I do is represent physicians. And in the middle of COVID, I started to realize that something was broken. These doctors were calling me with basic questions. They were crying in my ear. There was a real struggle out there with physicians, and I knew I wanted to do something different. So I started a product-based business where I created videos where I could train doctors and help them understand how to prevent the problems that I was helping solve on the other side.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because they really don't get that education in medical school. Or, I was a dental hygienist and taught in the dental school, and I know they didn't get that as dentists. They didn't get that education either. So it's really neat you're filling a gap there. And so what has been your struggles, starting a business that's not law-based?
Well, it's crazy different. When you started a law firm, you say, hey, I work by the hour. I have a great reputation. You start networking, you get business, you get referrals, and then it sort of works. I mean, It's not rocket science. But when you start a product-based nationwide company in a world that's very crowded, and you have to figure out digital marketing and funnels and what the heck is a Google ad, and how do I get this out there? What is my messaging? Do I have a strategic point, to all of this? What's my story? It is a different world entirely than practicing law. And so that has been a real learning curve for me to try to figure out, you can't just put a product in the market and people just run and buy it. They're not waiting at your door, to take your thing and pay money for it. So even though as a lawyer, it was almost easy to get work, referrals, and, I'd get a lot per hour, and I was kind of used to that. And I got really entitled. And when I heard my friends say, I own my own business, I'm like, yeah, me too. I own a law firm and I can manage it. And then I started this. I was like, I know nothing. I have zero skills. I am starting from the bottom. I worked with so many different people, and everyone's telling you something different. Social media people, marketing teams, digital people, all the things. And sometimes you just have to clear the noise and you have to learn it yourself. Right. I hate to say that, but there is no shortcut to this. You have to dive in and you have to figure it out, and you have to admit that you don't know things, and you have to learn them. And so it's been a year of just learning, right? How do I sell what I built? Because I did it a little backwards. I went and built the product. I probably should have tried to stagger this a little bit, but I put all my eggs in one basket. I went to upstairs in my house. I turned a room into a literal film studio, and then I hired a film crew, and I recorded
oh my goodness.
It took me a whole year, and I recorded 55 videos. Everything I could think of that hurts doctors, I made a video about. So it was, part of me was like, this is crazy because I'm undercutting my own law firm. If they avoid these problems, are they really going to still hire me to fix them? But I thought that's very short-sighted thinking. We need to help the world. And I know that I'll always have a place for my firm because there's always a need for health lawyers. But with COVID, I don't think people realize how tragic COVID was on the world of healthcare and for physicians.
No, I think you're exactly right. What kind of things, a lot of times I feel like healthcare clients just need someone to listen, right? want somebody to listen to their struggle, provide them with options. And sometimes it's a mix of business and legal questions really in this area.
Honestly, half of what I do is not legal. It's just being they call us attorneys and counselors. Mm-hmm. It's the counselor part. Like you said, when doctors call me and they say, I've got a board complaint, this patient who I lovingly treated has now turned against me and, filed this horrible complaint to the medical board. Now my licensure is at issue. They're not really asking me for my legal advice. They want to hear it's going to be okay. And you did nothing wrong. And I've got you. And we're going to walk you through this together. So many doctors call me to just have a privileged, safe space because they're so type A. They don't want to admit any mistakes. They don't want to admit any weakness, but it's safe with me. And that sucks that they have to spend $500 an hour to have a safe space to talk, And so part of what I wanted to do with these videos is just to normalize it. When I look at a pathology report and it says 13, I don't know if 13 means I'm on death's door or it means I'm super fit and I just ran a marathon. It doesn't mean anything to me because I don't understand it.
Right.
But when I explain to them, you're not supposed to know how contracts work and the intricacies of healthcare regulations, right? It's not your skill set. So I can break it down for them in a way that normalizes the fear. So they're like, oh, okay. Thank you. Now I realize, that there's a lot I can learn and that I'm not, I don't have to feel so flooded. So part of what I do is listen to them and hear the pressure points, because here's the deal. I was getting basic questions and basic fears over COVID, and they were like, healthcare heroes, everybody bring your hospital buckets of, charcuterie boards, and now all of a sudden it's like, what have you done for me lately? I emailed you on the portal. I want a telemedicine visit in the next hour, where you are a terrible doctor and I'm going to write a bad Yelp review and I'm going to report you to the board. It's like, what happened?
Yeah.
So these doctors need our support. They really need, us to be advocates for them because no one else is doing it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And James, there's some talk now in the legal profession that really, there is a need for consultant services too. And you've seen even some practices bring in a whole department where they give that consulting to businesses. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, listening to Amanda talking about physicians, I was just putting myself in that scenario and, in our legal profession, although, it's not just physicians we're representing, but just clients as a whole. And it is amazing, Amanda, how much of our practice now is the, counseling part of the process where even, I'm thinking the mass torts that we handle, where you have all of these individuals that have been affected by, and diagnosed with various diseases and conditions, and you get on the phone with them, and a lot of it is talking about, what they've experienced, their feelings, and, kind of counseling them in that process. So, consulting, I think there's certainly a need for it. But I feel like even in the general practice that we handle with businesses, we're already doing a lot of consulting where you're preparing for things that could happen.
Right.
Not necessarily has happened, but just to protect them in whatever aspect of their business. So,
Kevin, how much time do you spend teaching clients? I mean, I think I spend quite a bit of time just educating my clients on the law, and there's other people, school of thought, that says no, that's not what they're hiring you for. They just want you to do what they're asking you to do.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Misty, Kevin doesn't teach, he preaches. We all know this.
That's right. He's a preacher.
Well, I think by default, just because of the way that James and I practice area is situated, a lot of times we're addressing problems that they want fixed and teaching along the way with respect to how it should be done, because a lot of times you're having, at least when we first get in contact with a client, there's an issue that needs an immediate address. But certainly with respect to transactional issues where you're drafting corporate documents or drafting employment agreements or things of that sort, I think the number one thing you always want to speak about to clients, and I think we all sort of tangentially addressed it, is risk mitigation. And that's sort of what we always like to address is, okay, so identify what the risks are in this certain industry or in this certain practice, identify, then address those issues or address those risks. And then you find creative solutions to address those risks. And then you find other ways to prevent those risks. So, it's very important because as lucrative as having a repeat client come back with the same issue, it just isn't good for America, isn't good for the community, isn't good for their business. So I like to use issues that we find, even if they're smaller issues that aren't really the material part of a case, to highlight to our clients that, hey, this is where you also could be subject to some sort of issue down the road, and make it kind of plain and clear to them in that point. So it's addressing issues and then also trying to teach at the same time.
Well, and as litigators too, Misty, talking about teaching, you have to teach your clients that, number one, you're not always right. Right. and then two, even if you are right, the jury may not see it that way.
We know that one, don't we, Kev?
And there are so many clients that come in this door that want their day in court until you play devil's advocate. You tell them the horror stories relating to specific cases that you tried and how unpredictable 12 jurors of your peers can be.
Right.
That's right.
So
that's absolutely right. Well, Amanda, when you look at a contract, you're looking at a physician contract. What's the first thing, kind of on your first review through that? What are you looking for?
Well, this is like my favorite topic, so y'all better buckle your seatbelts. Okay. So majority of what I do is transactional, and most of it is physician contracts. So I have my own style. I think I've sort of evolved into after doing this for 2 decades. And it might not be the same as everyone, but for me, it's been wildly successful. So when I look at a contract, my first thing is not, let's start contract edits. I want to talk to the client about what leverage we have going in. So I want to talk to them about, all right, what sets you apart? You're looking for this job. What makes you different from the 5 people next to you? I want to know bullet points, not just your resume. Everybody is starting from the same position, just like lawyers, right? We all went to law school. We all have credentials. We all have the same certifications. But are you good with people? If so, give me some examples. Let's tell stories about how you're going to make them look good. Because when I negotiate, the only thing that matters is you looking at it from the other side's perspective.
Right.
You don't go in there and blast how great you are. You explain how you're going to make the other person's job better. You're going to make their hospital look better. You're going to give them value. You're going to make them more money. It's all about the other side. Right. So the first thing I do is just talk leverage, and it's so fluffy. And the doctors are like, I thought we were going to talk about the contract. I'm like, au contraire. We're going to talk about what makes you a badass and how they want you more than anybody else. And then we're going to talk about the contract. Right. So that's the first thing I do, which is surprising to them because they're writing me bullet points like, I'm bilingual. I don't know. I'm really good with electronic medical records. I'm like, boom, anything's leverage. Right. And then once I get to the contract, my way of operating is I like to go through it and just write every note and every thought, what's standard, what's not, what can hurt you, what's good. And then I send that to my client, right? Hey, this is my thought process when I'm reading this. This is my overall impressions. It's a good contract, it's not, or it's a bad deal, or here's some problems. But I don't necessarily go to the other side with all of that nonsense.
Right.
Because I'm a huge, we have to pick our battles when we negotiate. And you were talking about risk, and that's exactly right. It's like, I might not like the way some of these are structured. I might not like the fact they can terminate you immediately if you don't follow all their policies. There's always language in a contract that you should probably edit to your client's advantage. But do you? No, not always.
Right. Can't do it all. Can't do it all.
You can't do it all.
Yeah.
And so I always try to stick with 3 or 4 big ticket items. I start with the leverage. This is how my client is the most amazing human and is going to make you look good. And they're going to make your, profession better. And then all we're asking for is 2 or 3 things. That's it.
Right.
I love that.
Wow, I gotta watch out for you, Amanda.
I'm telling you.
You got to watch out.
No, I absolutely love that because, you're showing the advocacy even in contracts. Is that we have to even there tell the story, right? And so I think that's just a beautiful example. How about you, James? What's one of the things that you really dig in there and look at first?
Well, first, the transactional side of drafting contracts, I'd prefer to,
I'm about to say
never.
Don't you get act like you love drafting contracts?
So I'm going to take it from the litigation perspective.
Oh, let's do it.
And so when I'm looking at a contract, Kevin, I'm going, how can I beat it?
Yeah.
How can I pick this contract apart?
Yeah.
Because that is typically the job. You know, whatever side that you're on, you know, someone's contending you've reached the agreement, or you're contending they have. So if someone is saying that, you know, my client has breached it, it's okay. Where is the ambiguity?
I knew you were gonna say that.
in this contract, so I can, you know, I can create some sort of argument of, no, we really didn't breach the contract, and this is obviously in a case that your client did in fact breach it.
Yeah.
But there,
Our clients never breach.
Well,
Come
I'll
on,
be
James.
honest with you. I haven't ever had a case, Kevin.
Yeah.
Where my client had breached the contract.
I'm sure you haven't. I'm sure you haven't. Never.
My clients are always right.
Right.
Just so you know.
The judges thought otherwise, but, and maybe a jury, but me personally, no, my clients never breached it. But that's how, you know, that's how I always look at it. And honestly, even from a transactional side, when I am going through a contract, I am looking for ambiguities, because I know that's going to be the impediment of potentially enforcing this contract on behalf of my client. So is there anything in here that I think two minds could differ on its interpretation?
Well, I think good contracts that are clear set out, you know, good business relationships that tend to be fruitful. I think where you get those ambiguities, that tends to create conflict between parties. If we all know the terms of engagement, right, then we can go about, you know, acting in accordance. Every once in a while, there's an efficient breach, but typically not. I mean, one of the things I look at is, you know, how can my client get out of this contract if it's no longer fruitful for them? Do we have the proper terms in effect in the contract in order they can give a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice? You know, that tends to be very important to my clients. How about you, Kevin? Is there anything with contracts that you're looking for?
I'll say from both perspectives.
Okay.
I think one from the plaintiff side, if I'm seeking to terminate an agreement or trying to invalidate a contract, I think one of the most important things you want to find is obviously that ambiguity, because that's what creates those questions of law questions of fact that eventually become expensive for companies to litigate, and it becomes a cost benefit analysis for the company at that point in time. But from the perspective of an employer in looking at contracts, you know, I think employers, when I speak about an agreement that they're maybe wanting to have drafted, the way I like to look at it is, okay, let's pretend the prospective employee doesn't really need this job. They don't really have some sort of pressing desire to go here, but then, you know, they're certainly interested. What about this agreement would give someone who is not pressed to be employed by your company to say, hey, this is the company, or this is an agreement, or this is some sort of situation that I can best, you know, thrive in. So I look at it from that perspective. And then when we talk about clarity in the agreement, obviously what I look at is, okay, if we don't have enough clarity here, what are the chances and likelihood that we can expose ourselves to some sort of negligent supervision claim, or what can we do with respect to looking at JUCO and what's required, from JCO with what's required from there. But, you know, largely just making sure, like you said, everyone's on the same page, everything is clearly articulated, making sure that it's an agreement that, one, if there is an issue surrounding it, we've at least been transparent enough to have a meaningful mediation instead of some sort of contentious litigation over the dispute, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my perspective on it.
No, that's a great tip. Amanda, go ahead.
I was going to say, my biggest thing with contracts is I always assume the worst, because we're lawyers and we're jaded and we've been through a lot of fights.
We're
Right.
pessimists.
So I want everybody to sign a contract. I want you to put yourself in the position that something went terribly wrong. You need to walk through the exit to that contract before you sign on the dotted line.
Right.
And so I tell everybody, let's role play. You know, you start this job, it's a toxic waste dump. You need out, you want out. Where's the back door? Always look for the back door. What's the sales price? You know, I mean, I can't tell you the number of business deals. Doctors are terrible at business. It's a known fact. And they put, you know, $250,000 in investing in a surgery center, and the buyout's $10 when they leave. They just have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm always like, look at the back door. What's going to hit you on the way out? How hard is it going to be for you to leave? Because to me, I love contracts because it does provide some structure. And of course, I'm mostly on the defense side. So I'm like, how do I protect my client, from being abused? But also, how the heck get out? How do you get out of this deal?
How much
to me is huge.
How much do you deal with? Because I've had a few cases and have one now dealing with non-competes and other restrictive covenants. And I found that's all, well, not find this always, but my more recent cases dealing in this arena have always been surrounding these non-compete issues. And, obviously, the simple stuff like the geographic location, time, and all that kind of stuff, but it never seems clear, despite the non-compete saying what it says, that everyone is like, okay, yes, I certainly agreed to this. And it's the most frustrating thing to me to deal with.
Kevin,
everything is unreasonable, but in 2021, it was reasonable for you because you signed it, So I just want to get your perspective on that.
I do a ton of non-compete stuff. So in Texas, they're robust and strong. Whether they will be in the future, given the Fed's positions, who knows? There's about 4 states that have banned them altogether. All the other states sort of have differing levels of what is reasonable and what is not. And of course, it's not clear. And I don't care if it is reasonable. If my client has one, I'm going to argue it's not. We find it anyway. So we always find ambiguity on either side to try to say, well, they signed it, but that's not what the parties were intending. Or it doesn't matter what they were intending. It ain't fair. You want to try to go through this injunctive hearing? You want to go through this process? What a freaking nightmare. Why don't we just settle on less mileage?
Right. Man, we had a funny one. This was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and there was a certain geographic radius. We'll call it 10 miles. But the way the roads were situated, it was like 9. Well, the way the roads were situated, it was like 11 miles. The only road to get there was an 11-mile road, and so it was a 10-mile radius. And so we were arguing that, hey, as the crow flies, yes, it's 10 miles, but nobody's driving as the crow flies. It's going to be outside from a distance perspective of what the mileage range was. And so I just remember us going back and forth, and we actually found, I think, was it Minnesota adopted a similar policy where it was on the road was what mattered. And so it's just interesting to argue.
I've made a lot of crow fly arguments. Usually those don't work. It's really fun. I find advocacy is in any aspect of law, whether it's in a contract, whether you're in court, whether you're just trying to get an employment issue resolved. Everything involves storytelling. You have to be their advocate. I was just talking to a doctor this morning, who's applying for privileges at a hospital, and he's got some major skeletons in his closet, y'all. Major, and we're talking drugs, sex, rock and roll. The whole thing.
Hey, don't let him operate on me.
So I have to make a story, as to, okay, he's learned from this experience. Everybody has tragedy that they've overcome, and now they're better for it. And here's what's happened as a result. But all of that is advocacy. And it's not really that I went to law school to learn how to write a story to make this person sound better. But all of us have that training because it's important to our clients. So I think that one thing I've learned after doing this for a long time is that we have so much knowledge that's in our brains that we have learned the hard way. It's not black and white. It's not always pulled from a statute. And so we have to share it widely, with clients, with other lawyers that are coming up in this world. Like I tell new lawyers, oh, that's so cute that you bled all over that contract, or that you thought you needed to bring up 15 points when 5 of those were loser arguments, focus on the big stuff. So it's our duty, I think, to teach that, continue to teach that advocacy and that storytelling and how important it is in our jobs.
No, I think you're absolutely right. One of the reasons we started this podcast. But when we talk about contracts, we do not learn how to draft a contract. We do not learn how to review a contract in law school. So, Amanda, how did you learn how to work your way around a contract and negotiate it?
It took a lot of years as an in-house counsel, reading a lot of contracts. And, everything in life, you can look back and you can say, well, that was not a fun job, or I didn't really like that experience. Cancer kind of sucked, but all of them are learning experiences. And so when I had one job that I was stuck in an office and I just reviewed contracts all day, I became good at it just because of the nature of doing it. So I think that you really have to realize that if you're in a position you don't like, what do you take from it that you can carry forward? So when I started reviewing contracts, I started seeing different templates, and I would say, well, this template is written differently. Why? Or how can, and then you get burned. What's a force majeure clause? Nobody cares until it's an issue. And then you realize how important it is.
Till COVID.
And so I've been burned so many times over 23 years that I know the importance of every single provision of the contract at this point, because I've seen every one of the things go wrong.
Right.
And so I think that's really important. It's just, it takes time.
Agreed.
You know, you can't just be like, a contract is two people making promises with consideration and like, boom, it's that easy. Not that easy.
No, and you learn, I say this over and over and over again, you learn far more from failure than you ever do from success.
Come on.
Amen.
That's a word. That's my quote.
Now, one of my favorite things to talk about, especially to teach about and present on, is compliance in the healthcare space. It's huge, right? But I face such resistance, especially from smaller to mid-size practices, and just convincing them this is something they need in their practice. Amanda, how do you kind of use that advocacy to help them understand it's a necessary thing?
Well, usually it starts with me giving a speech, and then I scare the bejesus out of them, and then they come and say, I'll give you anything. Look under all my rocks. I'll do whatever you say. But in all seriousness, I like to talk about it like this. I'm not going to teach you how to be a healthcare lawyer, okay? You're not going to understand all the intricacies of the Stark Law and the Anti-Kickback Statute and False Claims Act. There's no way you even want to learn that. What I want to teach doctors is how to issue spot better. That's it. That's it, right? I want to teach you when something should raise the hair on the back of your head to go get help. And so I try to touch on the basics of the highest, riskiest things that can get them in trouble or send them to jail, that's when they need to call their lawyer. So they don't just enter blindly into these side deals thinking it's fine because their buddy did it or they said it's vetted by legal. So I think that when you talk about compliance, you have to, number one, convince them to audit.
Yes.
That's my first advice. Please have someone audit your practice from a security perspective, from a billing perspective, and you're paying for that. Okay. Medicare comes in, your life is ruined. If you hire an auditor for $1,000 to come in your practice and say, oh, it looks like you've been doing this billing wrong, then you get to correct it, pay the government, and you're done. But if you have someone else come in, right, Medicare, CMS does an audit of your practice, then there's treble damages, there's fines. I mean, something that was a $4,000 mistake can turn into $500,000. Yes. So it's so much more you have to hit the finances with doctors. Yeah. It's financially better for you to listen to my general bullet points, take a small training course, to make sure your billing and coding is audited frequently, than to have to face the ramifications. Because these are not small issues that pop up. They're like crippling bankruptcy level, possible jail time, you could lose your license consequences. Yeah. So I think that's how you make compliance. You can't say, compliance is important, and I'm not going to shoot Medicare regulations at you, and I'm not going to send you government links. It's like snooze fest. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
But what I can say is, do you want to be in jail? No. Do you want to have, because I've had these things happen where, here's a doctor. They have no idea they're doing anything wrong, right? I had a therapist that ran a practice, and she didn't know that the start time and the stop time of the visit had to be in the actual note, right? She was like, well, you can look and see when they came in, and we have a scheduling software. Like, what's the big deal? But she was audited, and it was an error, and there was a coding mistake because she didn't include that in the note. It was a total of $3,800 that allegedly was a false claim because she didn't document it correctly, right? And she was like, no big deal, just pay $3,800. Well, by the time the damages were troubled, by the time they did a calculation, they extrapolated that mistake to all of her other charts.
5-6 years out, yeah.
That's legal?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a $500,000 fine. And she was like sobbing. She's like, I run a small therapy practice. We treat 4 kids. Like, we can't handle this kind of money. So, of course, she had to hire me, and we disputed it and fought it and, went all the way through to the end and ended up settling, for $50,000. But my point is that this is the tragedy when doctors just don't know what compliance is valued. It is extremely important that they weave this into their business expenses. They have to. Shouldn't be an option.
Yep, absolutely. And from a plaintiff's attorney perspective, you jump in here, you've got your client that's alleged, medical negligence. What are you looking for? What kind of documents are you already, besides the medical record, going to be looking for?
You asking me or James?
You mean when When I'm defending a med mal case?
Oh no, I was asking James and Kevin because a lot of times they take it on from a plaintiff's perspective. They've worked both sides, but
compliance side. I mean,
he's a policy and procedure guy.
I love an operation that is just a nightmare from a compliance standpoint, because then I can utilize. Hey, look at all the other things they weren't doing right. Mm-hmm. So are you really going to believe them when they say that no, they were doing it correctly on this issue?
Yeah.
Come on, no way that's the case. And you know, so if you have written policies and procedures, Kevin, that you can look at,
I know,
and be like, well, violated that one. I mean, because what that also does is potentially creates. You talk about treble damages, Amanda. It potentially creates a punitive damage type case because of now the gross negligence in making the conscious decision to intentionally violate every one of these policies.
That's such a great point.
Love it.
Because
Kevin. That gets me excited.
I know. I hate when you do that like that. That is, it's good stuff.
Because I've seen this so many times, and I bet you have too, Amanda. They write these beautiful policies and procedures, and they never really follow them. It's that old concept of, we got the HIPAA notebook, or we got the whatever notebook over on the shelf, but nobody's using it. So that
I'm a huge, I said to a client the other day, I said, I'd rather you have a 4-page compliance manual, okay, than an inch-thick, dusty thing on a shelf that is going to get you in trouble. Another thing that is a personal pet peeve is when you have an employment manual and you rewrite, because you pull it off of the internet, and these people aren't savvy, and they end up having an employment manual that sort of rewrites the law because some Yahoo wrote it, that's not a lawyer. And I'm like, you have now created an entirely new standard that your company has to follow. It doesn't even track Title VII, but here you are, and now you have to follow it because you put it in your policies, right? So it can definitely be a double-edged sword. And also, if I'm representing a doctor and they want out, and there's a toxic waste dump of a place that they're working, don't think I won't call whistleblower on any possible compliance issue.
Yes, that's nice. We'll talk about, whistleblower complaints. I mean, that's the False Claims Act allows a private citizen to bring a claim on behalf of the Department of Justice, behalf of the government. And those are always things that, doctors need to have in the back of their mind, especially doctors that are billing government health care payers, right, sure. Amanda? Yeah. So, what's your number one tip for somebody that doesn't have a compliance program and wants to get one started? What do you say? What's step number one?
Well, of course, shameless plug, I'd say go to Guard My Practice and buy my course. But seriously, you need to have a compliance plan. It's really simple. It's actually, there's only 7 elements you have to have. The OIG has already written you a cheat sheet of how to write it. So get a compliance plan. And here's the most important tip I would say is auditing. I know I'm repeating myself.
No, I say that all the time too.
Just audit. If you can audit your practice, you'll find the mistakes by someone who's trained. And so, knowing the basics of what can go wrong, it's just issue spotting. Again, when I look at an EKG, it just looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. But you know what? It just takes a little bit of education for a doctor to say, okay, do you see how it goes like this? And do you see how that's normal? And then do you see how it looks funny right here? That's educating me. And now when I look at an EKG, I can say, oh, okay, I kind of know what that means now. So it's just us educating doctors. Do you know how the risk is when you sign up for a deal that there's referrals going back and forth? Right. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So I think taking a basic compliance course, auditing your practice, and having a culture of people telling you that there's a problem. A lot of doctors, yes, just say I don't want to hear about it. You guys fix it. And then the staff and the nurses are petrified to tell the doctor, hey, I think there's a problem, or I don't think you're billing this right. And I think you might be unbundling, or, everybody this partner that works here, this is another case of mine. It's there's an ENT practice, ear, nose, and throat. And one of the ENTs, everybody gets a nose job. You get a nose job and you get a nose job. It's he was overutilizing. It wasn't medically necessary. He just wanted to do the surgeries because it billed higher. Yeah. Someone needed to point that out. How many years did that go on? Right? Why were people in the office scared to point that out? Because they don't want to rat on the doctor.
Yeah.
So you need a compliance plan that is transparent, that encourages people to bring these things up, because it saves the entire practice.
I tell them that all the time, because when you look at False Claims Act and key scam cases, almost always that particular individual that's the whistleblower attempted to raise the issue within the organization first. Sure. And it was only after they didn't feel heard, the organization hadn't done anything about it, that they then sought bringing a whistleblower case. So, that right there is a lesson in itself. Create a culture of compliance, and allow people to be honest and open with you to fix issues.
We had a case like we were investigating one at one point in time. You remember the one that we were investigating, and they had, I think it was their Medicare records showed a different, the time that they treated the patient was a different time in which they claimed, I guess, under Medicare. And they just told us that they just had an audit done and they were fine. And I was like, okay, well, what do we do from there? When they said they just had an audit done and they were fine, I was like, do you take their word for it? I mean, we were also in the middle of a multi-million-dollar negotiation as well at the same time. So we were not trying to, muddy the water too much. But I was just thinking to myself as we were doing that, James, like, what do we do if they say, well, we just had an audit done by Medicare, they said we were good and everything was okay? I'm like, how do we check that?
Sue your auditor.
I think that's really important. You bring that up. You use that in your settlement discussions. Like how, you said we were doing fine. You can't go back and take 2 bites at that apple. So I think that's crucial to bring that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That troubled me. It troubled me to see that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to continue to preach the compliance plan, that you got to have it, and here's why: we mitigate risks. Kevin, you just did a presentation on negligent supervision and negligent hiring.
Yes.
And kind of, in a nutshell, tell us about, if you were talking to a healthcare organization about how they give us kind of your top 3 on how they mitigate risks from those actions.
I think, in North Carolina, at least, the claims largely overlap and deal with, I think the most important piece is notice and constructive notice or actual notice on sort of the tendencies or propensity of a potential employee or an active employee to do something that's not in accordance with the reasonable standards. So I think one of the first things, and we've all addressed it, is a clear scope of work, because someone that maybe commits an intentional act or maybe a negligent act that is outside the scope of work may provide and insulate an employer from any sort of, obviously you want to get away from any sort of responding at superior, but also negligent supervision and negligent hiring. But the next thing is obviously having those policies and procedures that we just discussed, having clear policies and procedures, and properly investigating and recording all investigations. You'd be surprised at how many companies say they've done an investigation, say they've made a report, and haven't actually committed it to writing, and then it ultimately come back to bite them. And then last, in talking about the notice perspective and foreseeability, so to speak, I always tell employers, one, and this is all in the context of promotions and things of that sort. Just because you promote an employee doesn't mean they're prepared for the position.
I think that's a great point.
Meaning that if you were a great, and I said a great RN, and you want to get promoted to a charge nurse or something of that sort, there still should always be some sort of level of training and monitoring and supervision along that route to make sure that they are operating in accordance with the standards of that position. So that kind of dovetails into the constant monitoring. You've got to be, as an employer, very, very vigilant with respect to everyone operating according to the standards of care. So those are the 3 things that I kind of hit on largely on that ABA presentation. Yeah. But it's those are the main things, I think. And obviously, I think you look at JCO and things of that sort who have great standards, and they can outline and guide you on what you maybe need to do and be thinking of, and what's sort of standard for the industry along the way. But you just got to want it. I think as an employee, you've got to want quality service, quality employees more than you want money. If you really care about the practice, you've got to want to have a great practice, not just a great bottom line.
Yeah, and I would say you've got to train your employees. Train. How can we expect them to know how to carry out our policies and to understand, like Amanda, like you said, to issue spot if you don't train them? True. Right.
Well, also, what about just keeping your ear to the ground? Yeah. Like, I know partners in a firm, in a medical practice that have really no clue what's going on with their front desk. I mean, they don't really keep up with the medical assistants. And so I had a case once where there was this massive, pervasive sexual harassment in the office. And literally the partners were like on an island and they just didn't know it was happening. that's negligent. You really need to understand what the basics of what's happening in your own company. And you can't just claim, I didn't really know that was happening. It's like your manager knew. You have a broken communication system here. Okay. So I think one of the things I try to talk to any employer about is, you have to have your ear to the ground. You have to know what's going on, and you need to listen. When someone raises these issues, and there should be buzzwords, harassment, feeling like I'm not heard, anything sexual, then you have to drop everything and start working on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
dig in and ask around, and you cannot ignore it. So many people bury their head in the sand and think, oh, they'll take care of that. My supervisor or something is in charge of that. Yeah. And that can be true negligence on the employer when you're not really investigating that. Yeah. But of course, we lawyers, it's interesting because we stand in our law firms, and like in our ivory tower, like, you need to do this and this and this, and they're coming to me like, do you know what our day's like? Do you know we have to see 40 patients a day? And, we don't even pee. And like, this is a nightmare, and we haven't had lunch, and we're cranky. And I'm like, I get it. Life is hard when you're in healthcare. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to also build in some systems to where we can't always put guilt, on the individual employers as people, because their jobs are hard. So let's make it easier. Let's create some infrastructure to where we're not putting that all on you. I think it's all, everything is storytelling. And I think some of the stuff this is how we have to tell the story to our clients. Yeah. You're not paying us, this much per hour to lecture you or to tell you what you should have done. And we're not all armchair quarterbacks. We really want to help you. And so we can protect you better. We want to help you with your hiring so we can defend you easier. We want to write your contracts so that we know they are safe. We're in this with you as your advocate and your helper. Yeah. If I can just get that across to other lawyers, it's like, you have to be a teammate with your client. You're not in here telling them what they did wrong and just fixing their problem and then you disappear. I mean, you have to kind of be involved in their career, in their job, in their personal struggles, and you're part of the team. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And just kind of to finish up on that, James, when you're, dealing with your different litigation clients, how important is it for you to really understand their business and their industry?
I always, talk about the general counsel role. I always try to understand, what's the business model, what's the purpose, even if it means if it's somewhere local that I can go and just visit, let's do it. Yeah. Just to understand the operation as much as I need to as a lawyer. I'm not gonna learn everything about the business, but just understand how they work. You can quickly determine how unorganized a business is.
That's so true.
By just visiting it.
Yeah.
And so that's important to me. And talk about, when things go bad, you have to be proactive on, taking a stance, doing the investigation, determining what the issues, are, interview everyone. Amanda brought up harassment. It is so important for a business, any business, physicians, yes, but any business. If someone's complaining about harassment, Kevin, you better be in there. You better find out what their story is. Talk to everyone else. How are we going to be proactive to make sure this doesn't happen again? Because as a plaintiff's lawyer, you're looking for that history. You're looking for a company that didn't do anything about it, where there was harassment. They were charged with something. And guess what? They condone the act. Yeah. Please, business, don't, from a plaintiff's perspective, please don't do anything to that employee. Because our jobs are hard and we don't have the time. Please don't do anything, because that makes that creates, talk about storytelling. That's an easy story to tell.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
If you're not doing anything as the company. So be proactive, when I'm talking to them.
What I deal with a lot is ghostwriting, because, there's so many emails that get sent that are defensive, that are not in their favor. And if they had just come to us, I'm a writer on the side. I don't know if you guys know that. I write humor. I've written a couple of books. So I love writing. But I want to rewrite your emails, okay? When you're telling that employee, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. We value you. You're such an important part of our team. We can't wait for... You have to work on that. And that's a skill. And when employers fire off these emails, they're killing themselves. All that's going to litigation.
Yeah.
Every one of those emails is an exhibit. And I just can't stress the importance of check yourself, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a staff, whether you're a CEO, and you're going to blast an email off that you think is going to tell someone off. Please run it by your lawyer. Say, is this right? You know?
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, stop. Let me write that for you that you can send it under your name. So I do a lot of ghostwriting for clients.
I love that
just
idea.
almost get themselves into a nightmare.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, I want to shift to our fun exercise. We always try to end with something fun, just loosen us up for the rest of the day.
This is my time to shine.
Okay.
Show how brilliant I am on knowing quotes.
So we're gonna try to identify some speakers on famous quotes. Okay, so
Kevin lives by quotes. So,
I do not.
mean, you should destroy this.
he's a quote
No, I
machine.
don't. I really don't.
But-
I live
but-
by movie quotes.
But for clothes, I'm not sure Kevin would know anything.
Well, I'm gonna start with my favorite quote. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and that's very relevant to our profession.
If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand. I'm going to say Einstein.
Yeah.
You got it, Kev. Look at that.
I'm good, JC. I am. Amanda, you thought I was joking. This is
You live by
this is a common theme. I win these. Einstein,
awesome.
Albert Einstein.
Okay. It's not the load that breaks you down. It's the way you carry it. What you got?
Load that brings you down.
Yeah,
It's
it's the way you carry it.
That's crazy. I've never heard that.
You have never heard
I've
this
never
quote?
heard it, but I like it.
I
I
like
do
it.
too.
I'll say Mother Teresa.
Lena Horne.
Oh man,
See?
that
Right
was
there.
my one.
Where'd you get it?
That was my one.
Was this like a top 15 quotes or something? Where'd you get this?
I mean, we're going
You
way
don't worry
back,
about
Ted.
James. If there is no struggle, there is no progress.
MLK,
Oh, I've
No.
come across this one.
Malcolm X. Then
No.
it's got to be Nelson Mandela.
Frederick Douglass.
God, I knew it was one of the black. I knew it. He was next. He was next. I was going down the list.
You let me down there,
Frederick
Kev.
Douglass. That was. I let the people down.
Okay.
I let the people down.
Amanda, this is one for you and I.
Oh, great.
Guys, get ready. If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
Wow.
Oh, gosh. Who said that? Oprah? I don't know.
No. Nancy Reagan.
No, Margaret
Thatcher. Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher.
I love Margaret
Gotta
Thatcher.
leave it to the Brits to have the good quotes.
I love it. Okay, this is the last one. Here we go.
Okay.
You can fool all of the people some of the time,
That's a song.
and some of the people all of the
That's
time.
Marvin Gaye.
But you can't fool all of the people all of the time.
That's got to be Marvin Gaye.
I don't know who said it, but I've heard it 100 times.
I've heard it on a
I've heard
song.
that.
It's Bob Marley. I'm sorry.
Bob Marley, where are you?
Are you joking? You never heard Bob Marley say that?
Bob
Get up,
Marley?
stand. It's on Get Up, Stand Up.
Abraham Lincoln.
I'd rather Tom pull up whether or not Bob Marley said that and Get Up, Stand Up.
Get
What?
up, stand up.
Yes,
Stand
don't.
up for your rights.
He said that. Tom, can you check that?
Oh, you're wrong. Just
I'm
accept
telling
it.
you.
Kevin, we believe you,
Except
man.
when you're
we
wrong.
believe you.
Fact check,
We believe you.
fact check.
Fact check that real quick, Tom, while we go through our quotes. Misty, you get to do your quote first.
Okay, I don't have a quote.
Okay.
Zero
Let's see.
quotes.
Zero quotes. I told
Hold
you
on.
mine. I started off with mine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Go
here,
down.
Kevin.
Go down, Tom. You can fool
Did he rip
You can
off-
fool
did he
people
rip off
sometimes, but you
Lincoln?
can't fool people all the time.
Yeah, he stole it from
didn't
Abraham
steal-
Lincoln.
First of all,
He
don't.
stole a Lincoln quote.
He did not steal Lincoln's
He
quote.
100%
I wouldn't be shocked
stole
if they
Lincoln.
inserted that quote for Lincoln.
All right. Well, I know you got a quote, Kevin.
Well, I don't want to give mine and nobody else has a quote. I like this quote though.
I want your quote.
How long do you take? to
I read
find
this.
that quote?
Listen, I read this a lot when I'm going to argue a case or argue in court anywhere.
Is this
Do you-
inspirational? for
Or
you?
negotiate. Yes, because
Okay.
I think this is something that really highlights what a lawyer has to be. A good lawyer.
Kevin Googled best quotes for lawyers. So
Good,
here's the top
You
best
see,
quote for
you
lawyers.
see what I'm dealing with, man. You let me know if you need anybody on the what's it, guard my practice. I do R&D, all that kind of stuff. But so this was a quote from Paul. And this is in 1 Corinthians 19:23,
man.
James. I said it to you millions of times, but I love it, Misty.
Let's hear it.
It said, and it's talking about how to
If you
best.
start talking about love is patient, love
No.
is blind.
It's talking about how to best relate to people and what you have to be in order for you to be able to relate to someone else. It says in verse 19, James, this is the New International Version. You can't turn there.
Good to know.
Though I am free and belong to no one, I made myself a slave to everyone to win as many. To win as many Jews, I became a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having law, I became like one not under the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those not having Christ. To the weak, I become weak, not because I am weak, but that I've become all things to all people, so that all possible means I can win their souls for Christ. And I say that, James, because I think it's relative to the moments that you have in court.
Right.
And when you're talking to a jury, you can't be James Moore. I can't be Kevin Lewis. I can't be Misty Blagg, the lawyer, when I talk to 12 people or I'm in a negotiation. I've got to be, maybe I need to be an employee who's negotiating the contract on the other side. Maybe I need to be a juror who's got, 2 kids, who's working 2 jobs, that needs to get out of court quickly, that wants just the quickest resolution possible and needs to hear a quick case. Maybe I need maybe I need to be a judge who's been, on the criminal side for too long and doesn't necessarily have a lot of sophistication on civil issues. And I need to understand how to break it down clearer for them. So I just really always like that the moment requires a different man or woman.
Right.
Depending on who is in
I
front
like
of you.
that, Kevin.
Yeah.
That was a really good one.
I love that. You really do have to sort of know your audience. I think that's a key there.
That
is.
is
Know your room, read the room. Who are you speaking to?
Agreed. Agreed.
If I go to West Texas to arbitrate a case, my twang comes out. All right.
I like it.
These are my people.
Hey, y'all.
That's like Country Mouse.
I
Hey,
say
y'all.
howdy. Sometimes
That's right.
little howdy.
James, do you have one?
I don't.
I will just quote my father. This is probably the favorite quote from my father, who is now passed. It's, if you keep doing something that's not working, do something different.
Pretty sure Lincoln
Obvious,
said
but
that.
true.
Lincoln said that.
Well, he may have stole it from Lincoln.
My dad said, if you don't get your act together, you're going to the army.
That's
My dad's quote.
Amanda, do you have a favorite quote?
I have a good quote. It's from Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, "Do one thing every day that scares you."
Oh, I
And
love
I
that
think
one.
it's really powerful, especially when you're an entrepreneur, and you're trying new things. And the another real favorite quote, Brene Brown had a version of it. I think Teddy Roosevelt had a version of it, whereas, if you're not in that ring, your criticism does not mean a thing to me.
Oh,
Now that
And
right
so
there.
I can't say enough. It's like, you are going to get criticism the bigger you are. I was on a television show one time. I don't think we've talked about that part of my life. I was on a reality show on NBC called The Apprentice.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
Wow.
I know, it was crazy. And with Martha Stewart, because I wanted to work for Martha Stewart, and I thought that'd be really fun. So I took a hiatus from my law job to go live in New York and try to work for Martha Stewart. But there are so many people that criticized and had comments and negativity, and it's never stopped. Every job, every new adventure, every new company that you try to start. And you just have to say, are you in the ring? Yeah. No. Your criticism means nothing to me.
I love it.
I learn, I'm growing. I'm doing it. I'm trying, and you have to get out there and do stuff that scares you, or you're never going to grow.
You got to move.
I'm putting that on my Instagram story in the morning in the gym. Are you in the ring?
Amanda, as a litigator, you've never spoken truer words.
Yeah, that made my chili hot.
Because a lawyer, especially on the other side, Kevin, a lawyer, I call them computer warriors.
You do.
But until it's game time, everybody can posture.
Yeah.
But until you're in that ring, we're going to see who's really ready to step in the ring, Kevin.
Oh, what a great way to end this episode.
Love it.
Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. To all our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Please follow us on Spotify and, catch the
How can they find your
Kevin loves to
Guard
interrupt
My
me.
Pride? I was just trying to
Always,
make sure.
100% of the time.
How can they find you if they want to find you? That's a simple question. I mean,
Find me on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Amanda Hill. Find Guard My Practice. I'm everywhere. So LinkedIn is probably where I put a lot of my stuff. But Guard My Practice, you can reach me there. There's a contact button at the bottom.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, I want to connect with people. I'm a huge connector, and let's share our stories. So, come find me and let's have a conversation.
You
I
have
think
great
it's really-
posts. I learn from them every day. I love it.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'll
Come
follow.
find me.
And I have started a new YouTube channel that I haven't added in content yet, but it's the thing that scares me, Amanda. It's
That's
called
awesome.
The
You're doing
Healthcare
it.
Lawyer. So there you go. Well, to all our viewers, please follow us, hit the bell so you get notified when a new episode drops of the Zealous Advocate Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to follow us wherever you get your podcasts.